All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the City Council meeting for February 22nd. We are still under Ordinance 1000 requirements, which means we have a hybrid meeting. As y'all can see on the monitors, we have Councilmember Mosley and Councilmember Saunders present virtually. Councilmember Gardner said that he was not going to be able to attend today, but he wished us a happy time here. With that, I have asked Council Member Holt to lead the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, as we come together this evening as a council to do the people's business, we pray for your guidance and your wisdom. Lord, we have much to be thankful for this evening. We're blessed. We're thankful for our families, our warm homes, and our friends. Lord, we have issues this evening that are before us that cause great strife and division. As we seek the answers, Lord, we only ask that we should look to you and we support each other, we lift each other up, and we seek your name first, and the answers will come. Lord, be with us now. We ask it in the name of your most holy Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, now and forever. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Holt. We will jump right into city business. We do not have any special guests or announcements on the agenda. Y'all have received a copy of the minutes from the February 1st council meeting. If there's no discussion on that matter, then I'd entertain a motion to adopt. We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. The next order of business is public comment. We have received some public comment cards. I believe those are all on agenda items, and so we will discuss those when we get to those agenda items. So we will move on to the financial statement review. Ms. Mathis, the floor is yours.
Good evening. We're going to see if this clicker works here. Yep, look, it did. There we go. So we're looking here now at January of 2021, which, you know, early in the year, there's not a whole lot in there, but we're going to go over what's there so far. Our county millage tax year to date, we're $66,000 behind budget and $11,000 ahead of the prior year. The trend behind budget doesn't surprise me, and I expect that we will see that for quite a while, as our largest receipts for the county millage tax are in May and October. So we will likely trend under budget until those bigger receipts hit. Our franchise fees year to date are $22,000 ahead of budget and $6,000 ahead of the prior year. State turnback funds year to date, they're $8,000 behind budget and $21,000 less than the prior year. Typically, we receive a special payment in January. I kind of went back to see why we were so far down under the prior year, and there was something labeled special payment. That's really all it said. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I suspect that the state typically kind of hits that mid-year, and if receipts have been larger than anticipated and stuff like that, they start and kind of do an extra disbursement to the cities on those turnback funds. As you know, we've been talking about they're holding all that back, and they've kind of backed off on our receipts, and they're going to kind of catch us up towards the end of their fiscal year, which is April, May, and June of this year. Our county sales tax year to date is $8,000 behind budget and $7,000 more than the prior year. This reflects taxes collected from sales in November. And our city sales tax is also $19,000 ahead of budget and $23,000 less than the prior year. I think, and RJ, you keep a pretty close eye on this. I think we had some big receipts in January last year that kind of may have fallen into some of those credits we paid back later in the year. So being under the prior year doesn't really concern me at this point in time. If we continue to see a trend that way, then we'll reevaluate where we go at that point in time. Police Department, current year-to-date is $38,000 behind budget and $14,000 less than the prior year. Similar to our millage tax, we've got some timing issues here that we're going to kind of look at for a while, primarily with the lot fee turnback funds. They're not received until July. And so it's going to look like our revenues are under budget a little bit here. So just kind of looking at where we're trending compared to the prior year is going to help us figure out, how far on or off track we are. And I'll watch it by the individual revenue line items as well. Fire Department is also $12,000 behind budget year to date and $6,000 less than the prior year, and has a similar timing flow there that we'll keep an eye on. Parks currently is $20,000 behind budget year to date and $18,000 less than the prior year. I think we're just going to have to keep seeing where we go with memberships, both for parks and seniors, to see maybe people are a little slower purchasing an annual pass than they would have been in past years. Just we're waiting for some COVID restrictions, hopefully to let up and cases to continue to go down. Seniors has a typical situation. They're $1,500 behind budget year to date, but $39,000 less than the prior year. And Nicole sent me an email today actually and said, hey, I think we're missing some revenue in January. In all our year-end rollover fund stuff that we've been working on, have not yet booked any of the annual passes that were purchased in December. They were recorded as deferred revenue in December, and I have not moved them into revenue yet. So we should likely see that number increase. I'll get that adjusting entry made. It won't really affect our fund balance, however, because it's moving from one area of the balance sheet to the other. Miscellaneous income, just kind of a note here, the largest budgeted item on this is the $646,000 transfer from the Capital Improvement Fund. I'm not going to record that transfer until we need to record the purchase of the fire truck so that those kind of coincide with each other and will match up for this year. Expenditures in all departments, other than community and economic development, remain under budget. They're slightly ahead of budget year to date, but I think that's the timing of some annual renewals of memberships and things like that were paid in January, and they'll trickle off through the year. And it looks like my sheet got cut off there a little bit on the rest of my description, but that's what it said. General fund balance. Whoops, there we go. General fund balance is $14,000 under the required minimum. I think this year, now that we're really tightly against that line of our required minimum, the timing of our cash receipts and when we get revenues in and things like that we're gonna see a little bit of a fluctuation in this. If it starts to get too big one direction or the other, then the mayor and I'll kind of regroup and develop some spending plans that can keep us in line with that minimum. But right now we're $14,000 under. We probably made that up, 2 weeks later when additional revenues came in on this. Taking a look at our street fund revenue and expenses, our county millage tax is $17,000 behind budget and $4,000 ahead of the prior year. And we'll see, again, that timing issue with those millage receipts in the street fund as well as on the general fund. The state turnback funds for streets currently year to date is $27,000 ahead of budget and $14,000 ahead of the prior year. So they haven't held back our street fund turnback funds. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the general funds what they'll look like when they start to catch up, is that we're trending actually a little ahead of budget and ahead of the prior year. Both streets and senior services transportation department were under budget year to date so far. And the street fund balance current available at the end of January is around $4.4 million. Looking at our sanitation fund, sanitation fees currently are about $1,000 ahead of budget and $1,000 ahead of the previous year. So trending really nicely there. Operating expenses are $42,000 under budget and $17,000 less than the prior year. Personnel expenses in particular are $22,000 under budget and $14,000 less than the previous year. And I know they're still working to fill some open positions there as largely a portion of that. Police and fire fund transfers to the general fund. Looking at our special revenue funds, they're current. We're still recording those monthly. The current year receipts for the fund are $9,000 ahead of the budget year to date and $11,000 less than the prior year. That's a sales tax receipt, so it's going to trend very similarly to our city sales tax. And then our FEMA grant fund, we completed the budget amendment and operating fund transfer in 2020. So now you're just going to see project expenses recorded in this fund with no additional general fund allocations required. And that sums it up for our January 2021 financial report.
Thank you. Councilmember Holt.
Good evening, Mr. Massis. In just a capsule, after listening to the general breakdown, is there a capsule statement that you could make for the city in general? Where are we? We're close. We're okay. Is there what could you say just in a sentence or two that would give us an idea of where we really are?
Well, in January of a new fiscal year, it's kind of too early to say one way or the other how we're looking, but so far things are looking good. I mean, there's nothing to really trend on here a whole lot. We'll see it even out over the next, probably by the end of the first quarter, you would have a better estimation of, do we need to step back and regroup, or we've done really well. I think the work that we did on the 2021 budget is going to keep us running pretty smoothly this year.
So we're close, but we're okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tight. We knew that. That's why we did so many budget cuts this year, to make sure that we were able to maintain where we need to be on our fund balance.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Mazzoni.
Yeah, I'm going left field on you. Do we have any estimate on when, because the 2020 census came out, so we're a few months to get January's receipts. Do they give you a heads up before to find out what the new rate will be that we'll get from the county for sales tax, or is that just hit the books and we figure out when it starts?
I don't know historically on that. Mayor, do you have any idea?
Well, I wasn't around for the last census, but my understanding is we'll get the census numbers, and then the amount we're getting in turnback funds is based on the per population basis relative to the size of everything else. So I don't have it in front of me, but we have the number we're getting per population, but we don't have the census numbers yet.
All right, thanks.
I've got a question.
Councilmember Mosley.
Yes, ma'am. I was wondering what the status of the 2018 audit is.
Well, prior to the snowstorm, it was almost completed. I still have a few things I need to get them this week. But hopefully we're wrapping that up, and I'll be beginning to work on the capper in the next week or two as well.
Okay. Have they finished their field work?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and we are probably about 1/4 of the way through the reconciliations for 2019. So while we're still working on closing out 2018, we are working on 2019's reconciliations and trying to get everything prepped to move right into the next one as soon as we finish the 18 one.
Thank you.
If there's no additional discussion, I entertain a motion to accept the financial statement. We've got a first and a second, or motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. With that, we will move on to department reports, and we have Chief Ezell to let us know what the fire department's been doing.
Well, my original intent was to kind of go over the call figures from last year, but then Mother Nature dumped a bunch of white stuff in our lap over the last week. So I'm going to make that the main content of what I'm going to talk about. I do want to mention that in 2020, it was actually March 11th, 2020, the first case in Arkansas for COVID actually hit. Within about a week to 10 days, a lot of departments in central Arkansas decided they were no longer going to run medicals. That was not anything we even considered here. Our department continued to run calls just like we always had because we swore to provide a service to the citizens of Maundell, and we were going to carry that out, irregardless of what other departments, were doing to try to keep their personnel safe. I got to give a big kudos to our division chief of training, Michael Cassi. He did an excellent job staying in contact with the Department of Health, the CDC, Dr. Mason, who's our medical control doctor for our EMS program here. And with all things considered, we had really good numbers. We were outstanding on not getting our personnel sick from going out and making these calls. I think we ended up with 4 out of 40 that ended up with it, and we don't know whether they got it here, whether they got it at home, or any of that. But 4 out of 40, and we were running these calls every day, day in and day out. I thought that was excellent. Our guys did a wonderful job during that time. So, wanted to throw that out there. We made just under 1,900 calls for the year. But the main thing that I want to talk to you about tonight was the last week. So since February 14th, which was Sunday, Valentine's Day, up until Saturday night, we made 84 calls in the city, 2 of which were structure fires. I'm sure most of you saw the big one we had Friday night. We had another smaller one on Thursday. We had a car fire. We had, I think 23 medicals during that 7-day period. And we ran a lot of water shutoffs where people's water lines had frozen, busted, and they had water flowing in their house. So we were sending people out to shut people's water off because CAW was inundated as well. I mean, they were running all over the place. So, 84 calls doesn't sound like just a whole bunch, but we had some days where we were running 22 and 24 calls in a day. I mean, there were times when we had crews running. We had the squad, which is a 4-wheel drive vehicle running out of Station 2, and we had the Ford Explorer that used to be the fire marshal's vehicle. We had it running out of Station 1, just so that we didn't take the really expensive trucks out and take a chance on getting them damaged. Of course, we ran them on the structure fires, but anyway, guys did an excellent job. I mean, 84 calls. We had guys working, a lot. We had several folks that were coming in the night before just to be there so that they were assured that they were at work the next morning on time at 7 o'clock. So the extra help came in handy quite a bit during that time. But anyway, that's really all I've got, unless you guys have any questions. I just very proud of the department. I think we did very well during the past week dealing with all the snow and everything else. But if you've never figured out where your water supply is, it's not all that easy sometimes when it's under 17, 18 inches of snow.
Not when you want to be looking for it. As we figured out, there was some water pipes that burst at the old fire station public safety building. And we were in there on the phone with multiple people kicking snow around in the middle of the night, trying to figure out how to shut off those valves. Thank you for coming out on that. That wasn't included in his call number.
Right.
There. Is there any questions, comments, discussion for the chief? If not, Chief, thank you for your report and thank you for everything you do.
Thanks, Chief.
We'll go ahead and move on to the procedural motion. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. We'll move on to unfinished business. The first item under unfinished business is the third reading of ordinance 1021, amending the Maundell City Code. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maundell, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1021, an ordinance amending sections of the Maundell City Code to reduce the number of copies of preliminary and final plats required for submission and for other purposes.
Thank you. As a reminder, this title pretty much sums up what this ordinance is. It's just to reduce the burden since we're moving more and more digital while still giving us a certain number of physical copies for the Planning Commission and staff to review if necessary. If there's no discussion, Councilmember Williams.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 1021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Madam City Clerk Treasurer, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Mosley,
Yes.
Councilmember Saunders,
yes,
Councilmember Mazzoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Councilmember Tierney,
Yes.
Councilmember Shin,
Yes.
Councilmember Holt.
Yes.
Motion passes. Ordinance 1021 is hereby adopted. Next order of business is the second reading of ordinance 1022, amending chapter 10 of the Maundell City Code. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Maundell, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1022, an ordinance amending Chapter 10 of the Maundell City Code to revise enforcement procedures, eliminate the categories of potentially dangerous animals and hazardous animals, to change the current definition of dangerous animal, to remove the ban of certain breeds of dogs, and for other purposes.
All right, the first item is we do have some public comments that were submitted to us in writing under ordinance 1000, which allows for hybrid meetings. We will accept and read into the record a limited number of written public comments. Madam City Clerk.
I'm reading them in the order that I received them. The first one I'll read is on behalf of Phil Stowers, 143 Pleasantwood Drive, Marmel. Dear honorable members of the Marmel City Council, all it takes is a quick Google search to discover that pit bulls and like breeds are the #1 killer of humans in the United States among dogs. The link is listed. I implore you to please keep in place the current ordinance banning pit bulls and similar breeds that statistically have much higher propensity to attack adult humans, children, and other innocent animals. I also ask that this email be read in record during the public comment period of the meeting at which this item is heard. Respectfully submitted. This next one I'm going to read is from resident Jeff Van Patten. Dear Mayor Norris, members of the Maumelle City Council, Madam City Clerk, and Madam City Attorney, my name is Jeff Van Patten, and I live at 131 Manitou Drive in Maumelle. I have been a resident of Maumelle for approximately 16 years. During those 16 years, I have had the enjoyment of serving with several of you here this evening on the Maumelle Strategic Planning Committee, and also served several times, including chairing the City of Maumelle Compensation Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with you today on the proposed ordinance 1022, amending Chapter 10 of the Maumelle City Code regarding enforcement procedures on hazardous or dangerous animals. I believe the City of Maumelle has a serious problem with hazardous or dangerous animals ordinance as is proposed. To further explain my point, the ordinance as proposed could lead to many negative unintended consequences for the City Council and the City of Maumelle. And after discussing this troubled ordinance, I would like to discuss a simple solution to the problem. The most striking negative thing about the ordinance is the optics of the ordinance that clearly favors a special interest group over the good and best interest for the overall City of Maumelle. These optics very much cast Maumelle in a bad light. Why do I say that? It is common knowledge that a special interest group has been pushing for a specific ordinance to be enacted in our city that they favored. This special interest group has even lobbied to replace members of the City Council of Maundell to support their effort. I think we can all agree that the support of special interest groups to the detriment of the overall good is one of the banes of our country right now and has added to the division in our country. We don't need more division in Maundell. Further, the optics are really bad when a special interest group lobbied and a controversial ordinance is placed on the city council agenda in the middle of a pandemic when ordinary Maumelle citizens are encouraged to stay home for their safety by the government, resulting in ordinary Maumelle citizens being disenfranchised by their own city council. I have served with Alderman Gardner on the City of Maumelle Compensation Committee, and he is a good man, and I don't believe that he has intentionally pushed to enact city legislation that supports special interest groups. However, this is the optics of the ordinance now, and I believe this appearance and any furtherance of this ordinance will only serve to create division in our city and community and disenfranchise Maumelle voters. Besides the optics of this ordinance, which are really bad, the ordinance has the unintended consequence of possibly creating unnecessary and extra lawsuits for the city of Maumelle and the council. Yes, Mayor, Madam City Attorney, I am aware that the concept of tort immunity in the Municipal League website does discuss tort immunity for cities. However, it is commonly known that any party may sue entities, public or private, for practically anything, and although the city may win a future lawsuit initiated because of the proposed ordinance, the lawsuit may come and they will be bothersome. Further, the ordinance of the proposed could lead to lawsuits between individuals within the city and situations where the city could be drawn into these lawsuits. It would be prudent for the city council to not create a situation that potentially would be liability for the city and the city council. What is my solution to the problem? I will recommend that members of the city council of the city council of Maumelle vote against this ordinance as presented, and a motion should be made and seconded and then voted to send this proposed ordinance to voters of Maumelle to decide at the next election, which would only be in a few months. By sending this matter to the voters of the council shows that the council isn't acting to favor special interest favorite projects, but instead trust the voters of Maumelle to make the proper decision. In this manner also, there will be buy-in from the voters of Maumelle rather than a disenfranchisement, no matter how the vote goes at the election. What is the downside to sending this matter to the voters? None. There's only an upside. Thank you for listening, Jeff Van Patten.
So that was the last public comment we had that was submitted in writing. I have one public comment card on this agenda item from Ms. Rush. Mrs. Rush. Floor is yours. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm Leslie Rush, and I live in Maumelle Valley Estates. I'm also a 16-year resident of this city. So, council members and mayor, there's so many layers that I can honestly come to discuss as I've been here previously discussing with you. But tonight, I want to focus on how our lines are so blurred with our current ordinance and encourage that we move forward to focus on all dogs equally. In fact, about half of the estimated dogs, which is 80 million dogs in America, are mixed breeds. Through canine genetic testing, studies have found that even people in animal-related professions, no offense, Maumelle Animal Control, they have a hard time identifying accurately the breed in dogs.
just by visual inspection alone. The Humane Society of the United States is one of many organizations that has not only shared this perspective, but they've actually gone out and conducted studies where they've taken large shelters and their employees and dogs coming in, and they've proved this to be true, that the identification is often wrong, especially when it comes to mixed breeds. So let's look at the handout that's provided to you. I gave you all a handout that are here, and then if you're online, I sent it to your email. And literally that takes our dogs, local dogs from Arkansas. These were all rescued within our state. They were all DNA swabbed. And you can see they resemble a huge variety of breeds. I mean, you look at them and you don't sit there and look and say pit bull, pit bull, pit bull, which we all know pit bull is a slang term under an umbrella, but you wouldn't identify them, which means you might be mislabeling other dogs, as stated in our current ordinance. But they all have one thing in common. Every dog on there has a percentage. Some of them, their highest percentage, are currently banned under our ordinance, but yet you would never know. They already live among us. They're already in our shelters. It's hard to identify because it's discriminatory to sit there and say, oh, you're a pit bull. Oh, you're not. Well, look at that form and you can definitely see. And I'm happy to share in the community page as well so everyone else can see publicly. So where will our city draw the line on which pet a family can love or which pet a family has to give up because they live in the city, because they love this city the way I love this city? Where do we draw the line on where they can't choose what pet they want when they want to come to a rescue? You know, I told you, and previously I've been in rescue now for over 20 years. And when they come to us and they're like, oh, we live in Marmel, we can't adopt that one. And it's just the perfect fit for their family, loving, nurturing, obedient, loyal, kind, great with children. Where do we draw the line on dogs that die by euthanasia at our shelter because they can't be adopted out? You know, when their only crime was literally being a stereotyped breed, or even just resembling a stereotyped breed. Besides the fact that visual breed identification is unreliable, breeds are becoming increasingly irrelevant across the country, making the idea of breed-specific policies even less effective than they already are. Managing dog behavior and protecting public safety are serious responsibilities of officials as well as animal advocates and rescuers. We want to see safe communities too. We sympathize with victims that have endured dog bites or attacks and their families, but tragedy motivates us even more to advocate against the policies that we know will not work and we put into system. Not only does BSL not achieve those goals, it actually moves communities further away and wastes critical resources. I hope you choose to approve our ordinance 1022, written by our very own animal control supervisor and expert for more effective animal control for all dogs and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment cards that I have, so I'll go ahead and open it up for discussion. If there is no discussion, it'll be.
I definitely have some discussion. I was kind of waiting to see if Mr. Mazzoni might want to talk about some of the things he's been doing, but would you like to, or would you rather I go
Mr.
first?
Mosley, you have the floor.
Okay. Yeah, I've since our last meeting, I sent out a letter to my constituents via email, probably sent out to about 180, and I know that was relayed on by some other people. Got back a lot of comments, probably had, over the last 3 weeks, I've had probably an equal amount of pro and con. The comments I got back from the people that we emailed out to were overwhelmingly against lifting the ban. I have gotten a lot of comments from the folks wanting to lift the ban, but most of them were form letters. I probably had 6 or 7 that were custom letters, and then most of them were just form letters. So I do pay more attention to those that I know live in Maumelle and take the time to sit down and write something out. I know we've drawn the attention of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. They basically called us out, wrote their lead editorial about a week and a half ago on pit bulls, and singled us out and said we should really be, our city should be banning these dogs, not lifting bans. And they encouraged us to do something that would actually improve the quality of life. Apparently, they didn't think that would improve the quality of life, and I agree with them. uh, let's see here, I have some other notes. Basically, I think this, lifting this ban hurts our reputation. We've always been known as a city that's a step above everybody else on safety. This basically starts leveling the playing field. We've got great police and fire. We've had apparently this in place. We haven't had a dog problem that anybody is really aware of. Nothing's really broken, so I'm not sure what we're really trying to fix here. And I've gotten a lot of emails in that regard saying, why are we even doing this? And I think that's a good question. I really agree with Jeff Van Patten's letter. One thing, you all, the folks that are for lifting this ban, you may have the votes to do it this time. There's been a couple of seats that changed on the city council. So you may have the votes. I would call that, if it gets passed, I would call that a political victory. There's been a lot of hard work for the folks that have been trying to get this ban lifted. But there's two types of victories. You could have a political victory or you could have a popular victory. Popular victory is if you go out and you poll the residents in some manner through a referendum and they want the ban lifted, then by golly, go ahead and lift it. If you win this politically, though, I really think that the folks that oppose lifting the ban are probably 70%. If you had a referendum, I think it would be 70 to 30. So I don't think you have popular support. This would be a political victory. When you have something like that, the residents are going to be upset if things go wrong. Some child gets injured, some dog gets killed, some cat gets maimed. You guys are going to be blamed. The folks that vote to pass this ban will always be the one people look at and say they were responsible for lifting this ban. But if you go ahead and you put this to a referendum and that's what the people want, then you're off the hook. Nobody gets blamed because city council went out, conducted a reasonable way of finding out what the city residents believe, and then did it. And then went ahead and did it. I don't think we could be blamed. I don't think those that would vote for this could be blamed at that point. So basically, I'm going to make a motion. I can either do it now or after Mr. Mazzoni's had a chance to talk, but I think I'm going to make a motion right now that we go ahead and table this ordinance until after a referendum on a general election of some type be held. So I hereby make that motion.
Mr. Mosley, just make sure I understand, it's to table it indefinitely or until date certain?
Yeah, I don't know. We could do a date certain. We could set a date like April 2022, whenever there's a primary election, or we could table it indefinitely and then just bring it up when we have a chance to put it on the ballot. Either way, what do you think would be best, Madam City Attorney?
Madam City Attorney?
I want to clarify a little bit the referendum process. For a city council to send something to referendum, it has to be passed first. So this is Arkansas Code Section 1455-301. And it states at the time of passage or within 30 days, the city council may refer to electors by a 2/3 vote of the council. And they can set that for a special election. And then there are certain timelines that have to be followed once that's filed with the county clerk. This is under 7-11-205. For special elections, those are generally held the second Tuesday of the month, not less than 60 days following the date the ordinance is filed with the county clerk. So we do have to follow certain timelines, and it has to be according to that procedure that once it's passed, then we would essentially have another ordinance voted on to send it to the county clerk for an election. Just so you are aware, all expenses of a special election called by the city's governing body, are to be paid by that city. I don't have any figures on cost, but the mayor and I were discussing this earlier today. Based on his recollections, if we waited tabled it, passed it closer to when we were gonna have an election anyway, either a primary, possibly next year, we're looking at a minimum of $15,000, and this is a very long ordinance. So, I mean, I think it's at 15 pages if we do end up amending it as has been suggested. So if 15 is the minimum, in reality, we're probably looking at closer to 30,000. By the time we do all the notices that are required to be done, we pay the programming fees for the computer work that has to be done to get it on the ballot and all those issues. So just so you are aware, there are significant expenses with an election on an issue like this. I think that's kind of the highlights of the process. There are specific things that have to be included in the ordinance requesting the election, so we would not be able to do it just by motion. It would have to be after the ordinance was passed.
So with that information, Councilmember Mosley, you made a motion to table this indefinitely?
Yeah, let's do it indefinitely.
I've got a motion to table ordinance 1022 indefinitely. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
I've got a motion and a second from Councilmember Holt. Is there any discussion on that matter?
How does that affect
The motion on the floor and before the council is to table ordinance 1022 indefinitely.
so that will not be shared tonight, if that is the case?
Well, once ordinance 1022 is tabled, it's off the agenda, as I understand it. Okay, so I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Yes,
Councilmember Saunders?
thank you, Mayor. I think it's important that we remind the city council that if we indefinitely table a motion, then the only way that motion can incur, I'm not an attorney like y'all, but the way I understand it is the only way you can get it back on the table is through another motion process. Is that correct?
I believe ordinance 1022 would have to have a motion to bring it back up. And there might be a time limit whereby someone could submit a separate ordinance. I think that's a year. I don't know. Madam City Attorney?
Sorry, that question I didn't get ahead of time, so I did not get to research. But generally, if you move to table a motion indefinitely, you're moving to table it until someone brings it back up on the agenda. So there would have to be a motion to place it on the following agenda, and that would have to be voted on at a later time.
Okay, well, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't. I have my opinion, but I'm not trying to influence anybody. I just want everybody to go into this with all the cards on the table. And it's my understanding after this many years on city council that if you postpone something indefinitely, somebody has to actually stand up and force it back onto the table. It's not going to happen on its own.
That's
Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I just want everybody to understand that, So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other additional discussion on the motion to table ordinance 1022 indefinitely? Seeing none, all those in favor of tabling ordinance 1022 indefinitely say yes.
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 All opposed say no.
No.
Could we have a roll call, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosley,
Yes.
Councilmember Saunders,
Yes.
Councilmember Mazzoni,
So indefinitely can't come back unless another motion, or that year is a hard year, or what?
So to table indefinitely is that there would have to be a motion at some point later on, at some future date, to place it back on the agenda. So how I would anticipate that would be is you could make a motion that it be placed on the following meeting's agenda and brought back up again. And then it would be considered at the following meeting, and we would kind of pick up where we had left off. If you are going to write and propose another ordinance that's substantially the same as this ordinance, same primary topic and that kind of thing, that's where I believe what I'm understanding Caleb to say is you would have to wait the year. Is that correct?
I know there's a 1-year requirement to bring back an ordinance that fails absent some procedural issues. And so I'm thinking that
That would be substantively the same.
yes. And so just to remind the council, what the motion is to table ordinance 1022 indefinitely. A yes tables, a no does not table. Councilmember Mazzoni. Councilmember Mazzoni.
I hate this because in one part, I think we need to give this due process. As far as,
Discussion is closed, Mr. Mazzoni. Councilmember Mazzoni.
let me see now.
Councilmember Williams,
No.
Councilmember Tierney,
No.
Councilmember Shin,
No.
Councilmember Holt.
Yes.
The votes were 3 to table. Motion fails. We will continue discussion on ordinance 1022.
Aye.
Councilmember Mazzoni, I believe your light was on.
Yes. Going back to prior to this, sorry, trying to figure all this stuff out. I looked at this ordinance another way. I'm looking at this is we need to put an ordinance that protects the people the most. So I went back through and looked where I found areas I thought could be improved and looked to improve them. I went through about 13 different cities' ordinance, went through there and came up with a rather lengthy change, and appreciate the city attorney for all the time she spent with me going back and forth. And I know Chris Davis was involved through email a bit. Sorry we didn't get a chance to talk. I wanted to prior to the snow and then after that. It's all here. Do we want to go step by step, or what would be the approved way of going through all the changes that I put in?
First, you probably are going to need to make a motion that we amend the ordinance 1022 in accordance with the document that was provided to the council.
Okay, I make a motion to amend ordinance 1022 with the document that was, that I supplied was filed.
Second.
All right. All right, we've got a motion and a second to amend ordinance 1022 to the version that the council was given earlier. I believe everyone has received a copy of that, either in person or digitally. So with that, is there any discussion on the motion to amend ordinance 1022? Councilmember Williams, I noted your light was on.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Mazzoni, I didn't get this till the 11th hour. Thank God I read my email as I was walking out my office door. But I do appreciate this. I think this is a very good amendment to this ordinance. What I noticed about it is that it focuses more on animal control and gives them more authority, I believe. And it not only gives them more authority, it makes their job easier because they're not having to try to identify certain breeds of dogs, just vicious and dangerous dogs. And I like the language of it. I think you did a great job, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And just a reminder to pull the mic close to you if you can. Councilmember Shin.
One thing that I think the public needs to understand is that we have to pass something before it can ever go to be voted on. So if we table it or we do nothing, then they can't even vote on it. So they have to at least let us go forward with something in order to get that. My communications do not support the vote, but it may be more people haven't looked at that as an option. But we've got to do something in order to get it there, if that's what they want.
I do have a question, a follow-up question for the city attorney. Was your statement that the council would have to pass ordinance 1022 in order to send it to the ballot, or is there a separate ordinance that proposes what?
So there would need to be a secondary ordinance sending ordinance 1022 for a referendum. Essentially, there are two ordinances.
Okay. Yeah, and we haven't discussed this before. But if ordinance 1022 were to pass in its current state or amended, it becomes active in 30 days?
And I didn't find that level of detail in the statutes, but it's my understanding that if you have voted to send it for a referendum, it would not become active until the referendum is complete.
Got you. Thank you. Councilmember Shin, did you have anything else?
I support the amended, I make a motion we adopt the amended.
Well, so we haven't amended it yet. If you'd like to make a motion in a moment, we can come back to that. Councilmember Tierney?
Yes, I'd also like to compliment Councilmember Mazzoni. I saw that you did a lot of work on that. I read through it. It looked very interesting. I do have a question. It's for the city attorney of how she feels the strengths and weaknesses of this compared to what we had previously.
I went over, so when I got Councilmember Mazzoni's 6-page amendment at 5 o'clock on Wednesday before the deadline, I did say, we're going to take some time. We're not going to quite make the packet. And I wish we could have made the packet, but we did take quite a bit of time to go back and forth. I mean, there are advantages and disadvantages to different ways of thinking about things. I do hope everyone took the time to read my memo that was included in the packet as well on special duties that the courts have said are owed to people when we have a contact with them, have a relationship with them, and we don't follow our policies. So my only concern is that I want our policies to be policies that we are going to be able to follow, that are going to be simpler to follow, and that we're going to be very consistent with. So while I think that the way it has been amended, it's great I want people to be protected. I do think there are a few things that are a little bit difficult to define and enforce because, like one of the things that RJ feels strongly about, and I agree in theory, is that a dog can be designated as dangerous based on an attempted attack without any actual contact. There are going to be some close calls in that. So I'm fine with the way he has amended it, but I didn't originally do it that way because I just know that it's very difficult to say, okay, well, this dog growled through the fence, this dog, lunged at somebody and was hard to control them on the leash while they were in the neighborhood. But is that enough to be able to say there was an attempted attack? Now, I mean, then again, it could be that, they lunged at, ran at somebody and the only reason they didn't get to them is because they, shut their car door fast enough or got behind some kind of barrier or something. So, you know, I mean, I don't really have an opinion either way. There are advantages and disadvantages to both, and I'm gonna leave that up to all of your good judgment.
Thank you.
I've got a suggestion if I can make a comment.
Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, perhaps, I haven't had a chance to review the changes Mr. Mazzoni made. I'm not sure what they are. Could I suggest that Mr. Mazzoni make a motion to table the ordinance till the second reading or the second meeting in March, and then schedule a workshop between now and that meeting to let you all sit down and figure out what's the best wording of the two versions or whatever, and make sure you've got the city attorney's input on it and that sort of thing. You can schedule a workshop right there in council chambers and meet some afternoon or evening or whatever, as long as the public can come and watch.
I feel like we have done that already, as far as I believe that I have written or, you know, altered the ordinance in compliance with what Councilmember Mazzoni wants to be in the ordinance. So I think that that's already been reconciled and done. We have spent extensive time rewriting and modifying. So I mean, it might be beneficial for him to be able to give more detailed explanation of his changes, but I don't feel like we need to go back and reword it if we're just considering what he wants the changes to be.
Okay, well, I'll have to vote no on the motion to go with his changes, just because I haven't had a chance to review them. So I'm sorry about that.
All right, is there any additional discussion on the motion to amend ordinance 1022? Councilmember Holt?
So if you amend it, what exactly are we doing? Are we going to just go back to starting all over again with the process, or is this the final vote and all of a sudden it's done?
A motion to amend in this case would sort of replace the current version of 1022 with the amended version. I'm assuming that we'd agree that that'd be a material change significant to send it back to first reading.
I'm like Councilmember Mosley. I'm sorry, but I've not had time to even, I haven't seen it until I got here a while ago. I'm in no position. I was waiting for the third meeting or reading, and I would be quite ready for it then, and I will still be ready for it then, but I'm not ready for it now. I would have to vote no.
Thank you, sir. Is there any additional discussion on the motion to amend ordinance 1022? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Yes.
Say, wait a minute.
Yes, Mayor.
You have something to add?
Yeah, I raised my hand. I have to agree with the last two council members. I got this at the 11th hour and I haven't had time to really peruse it. And I hate to make this kind of decision without being able to study the material. So I think I would have to vote no on it too. I think it'd be silly for me to vote yes, and I don't even know what I'm voting on. I haven't perused it. So I would prefer that we get a little more time so that we can look this over and know what we're doing. My opinion.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Williams?
So I need to be clear on this. What do we have to do now to amend it and go back to the first reading? What would we do tonight?
There's a motion and second to make that amendment, and it resets to first reading.
So we vote for the amendment and that resets.
To first reading, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
okay.
Absent any city council action tonight, it would be on third reading. The current version would be on third reading at the next city council meeting. A motion to amend sends it back to first reading.
Okay.
Councilmember Mazzoni.
So instead of tabling indefinitely, can we table this reading, give everyone a chance to redo it and look through it? Since it was the 11th hour and be able to vote smartly on it. So just instead of tabling indefinitely, tabling until let's see, well, next week's a bunch of this, say the second week in March? Or do we table it one, or what's the?
We could table it to the second week in March. Generally, the city council meets the first and third Monday
Sorry.
of the month.
Sorry.
But, yes, so that would require a withdrawal of the motion and the second to amend it. It'll be on third reading at the next meeting in its current form, or you could table it and it'd be on third reading at the next meeting. Either way.
I think, is RJ, I understood him to be asking, can we move to table the motion to amend until the next meeting? Is that correct?
Would it be better that or table to redo the second reading at that, so everyone can incorporate it and come back at the next one, which would be the more technically correct motion?
The motion is just a way to accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish. You could withdraw the motion and ask for a second reading at the next council meeting by motion. I don't think that's a problem.
Okay, and I'll do that. So I move to,
So I've got a withdraw of the motion to
Okay.
amend. Do I hear a withdrawal of the second from? Okay. So ordinance 1022 is up for discussion. Councilmember Mazzoni.
I'd like to make a motion to table the second reading until the next.
To have a second reading.
A
at the next
second
council
reading to incorporate, so we can talk about and vote on the amendments. That's right, too much.
Okay, and I would also just add, you could also make the amendment at the third reading, which will just happen if no one says anything from this point forward. But it would set it back to third reading instead of second.
I'm gonna hold firmly this time to my motion to table the second reading to the next council meeting.
I'm gonna,
You can't table a second reading.
we've had the second reading. We can have you can make a motion. I'm sorry, Madam City Attorney.
I think what I'm saying is you can move that we require an extra reading. Essentially, we have it read and consider the third reading to be the second reading, so that we have two more after that. But keep in mind, if your amendment is adopted, it goes back to first reading. So, and there's nothing to stop you from moving for the amendment on third reading.
Okay, then I will change again and withdraw all my motions.
Including the motion that you weren't going to change. Okay, so I heard a withdrawal of the, let me kill your mic there. No. I have a withdrawal of the motion to have a second reading at the next city council meeting. Is there any other discussion on ordinance 1022 tonight?
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Saunders.
I would like, for my sake and for everybody else's sake, I would like for you or the city attorney to state clearly, concisely, and simply exactly what we're fixing to vote on.
Nothing. There's no motions on the floor.
So they're all dead.
They're all dead.
Okay,
Withdrawn. Thank you.
okay, withdrawn. All right, well, I just need to hear that. We've had so much discussion.
Thank you. And just a reminder, please everyone speak directly into your microphone. Councilmember Williams.
I would like to make a motion that we amend ordinance number 1022, taking it back to first reading next meeting.
Okay.
How do you want to amend it?
With the new amendments.
So you're wanting to amend ordinance 1022 consistent with Councilmember Mazzoni's changes that he submitted.
Yes.
So the table's back, the motion's back on, but it's your motion.
Yes.
Okay. So Councilmember Saunders, we have did I hear a second?
Second.
Your second, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
Councilmember Saunders, so now the motion, and everyone, the motion on the floor is the old motion. You guys are testing my Robert's Rules of Order here. The motion on the floor is to amend ordinance number 1022 with the changes suggested by Councilmember Mazzoni, this would put it back on first reading at the next city council meeting with the new changes. Is there any discussion on that motion?
I just want to throw one thing in. I think this is a good thing because it will give us time to peruse what Councilmember Mazzoni has put forward.
I'm sorry,
So-
just to clarify, she wants to vote on the amendment tonight. So you would, her motion is to go ahead and vote on the amendment. So you will not have additional time. You will vote on the amendment tonight.
Well, then the first
But
reading though will be.
to clarify, that isn't approving the amended ordinance, that's amending the ordinance. It'll then have 3 readings
Correct.
effective at the next
Right.
council meeting, but it will be in its amended form.
And we could have the first reading of the amended ordinance tonight.
We could, I wasn't gonna ask for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, this is like Saturday Night Live, isn't it?
Gonna be Saturday night soon enough.
No, I can go with that because we're going back to first reading. That gives us all time to see the changes.
Yes.
Thank you,
So,
sir.
so I agree with that. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, this is the first time I'll be voting yes for something I've never read. So, but it does make sense as long as this is just the first reading at the next meeting.
It'll go back to the first reading, well, unless a council member were to make a motion and it passed to have the first.
Okay, I
reading
just
tonight.
want to clarify because 5 minutes ago, everybody said something completely opposite to what they're saying right now. So I just want to make sure that everyone fully understands. This is a motion to change the ordinance to be the ordinance that RJ has proposed for the amendment. Okay, so once you approve the amendment, you're going back to first reading, but we're always going to be then, unless it's changed or amended again, voting on and discussing the amended ordinance.
Right.
So, I mean, a few minutes ago, everybody said, oh, I haven't had time to read the amendment. You're voting on the amendment. Yes for the amendment or no for the amendment, okay?
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion to amend ordinance 1022? Is there anybody who's confused about what we're voting on?
Well.
And I'll happily.
It is
Okay.
confusing. to say the least.
So everyone received a proposed ordinance amendment from, I believe the city clerk sent it out and it was at your table. If this motion is passed, then that in the next council packet, the ordinance that you saw today will be the one in your council packet. And it'll be on first reading at that meeting.
Okay, yeah, effectively, we're killing what's there now and going back to first reading with Mr. Mazzoni's ordinance.
Correct, if this motion passes.
All right, I'm a yes vote.
All right. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. The amended version of ordinance 1022 will be on first reading at the next city council meeting. We'll move on to the next order of business quickly. The first order of new business is the first reading of ordinance 1023, amending the Marmel land use plan. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maundell, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1023, an ordinance amending the Maundell Land Use Plan and map and for other purposes.
All right, I'll go ahead and open this up for discussion. This is the Master Land Use Plan Amendment Ordinance for the former water treatment plant surrounded by Maundell Country Club. I believe we do have applicants' representatives or the applicant himself, if there's any questions. Open the floor. Is there any discussion on this ordinance?
Yes, yes, there will be. Is there some public comment tonight on that?
Is there public comment? We have, thank you for that question. We have one public comment that was submitted in writing that the city clerk treasurer will read into the record, and then one public comment form. Madam City Clerk?
I read this public comment on behalf of Frederickson. My name is Brad Frederickson. I live at 31 Fairway Woods, and I am the president of Marmel Country Club. Unfortunately, due to a scheduling conflict, I am unable to attend tonight's meeting in person. Please do not confuse our lack of participation in tonight's meeting with the lack of interest on the part of our members in the matter of zoning and use of property within the boundaries of the club. As you already know, Marmel Country Club strongly opposes the change in use designation of the former water plant property from open space to residential. This is for two reasons. The required city grade street necessary to access the property would significantly interfere with our golf operations and would represent a safety hazard. Secondly, the club believes that the best use of the property is with an expansion of our recreational amenities, which is the designated purpose of open space. By doing the math, the difference in price offered by the club based on the appraised value as open space and the announced price offered by the developer represents about 1 month offset in the 2059 monthly consolidation surcharge. This is a pebble in the ocean and does not mean a lot to CAW and very little to the ratepayers. So the question is, does the council favor the interests of an individual developer who does not live in Maundell over the interests of all 800 adult members, most of whom do live here? We will be watching.
I have a public comment card from Mr. Ron Harris. Mr. Harris, please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes, sir.
Ron Harris, 6309 Southwind Drive, North Little Rock, Arkansas. I appreciate his comment. Just city council members, we look forward to working with the city of Maumelle and the planners and whatever needs to be happening with them and the Maumelle Country Club officials. We look forward to working with them to develop a nice piece of property. And so I'll be talking to you in the next few council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the public comments that I have on this issue. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Holt?
Mr. Mayor, or City Attorney, what is different about this time than it was the last time where we listened attentively to your virtual meeting about open space, and so this is an open space, and so if we approve this, what is different about this time that wasn't there the last time? Or what's the difference?
Probably the best person from staff to answer that would be Mr. Grummer.
Scott Grummer, Director of Planning and Permits, City of Maumelle. So the request this time from the last time is actually the same rezoning request from open space to PRD and land use change to special use residential. It is the same as last time. The difference is the development that's being proposed. The last time they proposed originally up to 24 units of multifamily type units, which ended up coming in at about 16 units. This time they're proposing, it's a different applicant, I guess, representative, and they're proposing 5 single-family residential detached units, not multifamily. And they have requested a PRD versus R1 zoning.
Explain the nomenclature about PRD. Sorry.
So PRD means planned residential development. In a PRD zone, you can develop anything from R1 to R3, which is single family to multifamily units. They're proposing 5 single family units, and the reason why they're choosing the PRD zone versus an R1, which is strictly single family, is because in the PRD, that requires both planning commission approval and city council approval of the development plan. So you would see a development plan that would come through that would conform to what their proposed development.
And if I could clarify the procedure of how that would work, and I don't want to over-explain, but if the council approved the land use plan and the land use amendment and the amendment to the zoning map, then a preliminary development plan would have to also be approved, well, by the city council ultimately, but it would also go through the planning commission. Did I say that right, Madam City Attorney?
Well, but just to clarify, this is the same thing they were asking for last time. So, and we are deciding only on the rezoning at this point. We are not deciding on this particular development plan. That would come later. So it is, in that respect, it is the same as the last time it was considered.
So the basis of us considering the rezoning, if this is an open space, and we've been very protective, if I've understood correctly, about open spaces in the past. So however scaled down this may be, there's still residential or it's going to be used for that. Does this set a precedent, and will we be doing that in the future with, it's a domino effect, well, now we're going to just use them all? And how do we count for that? Am I saying that right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand
Yes,
what you're
sir.
saying. I don't know if I can answer that question. As far as how you go about, that's up to the planning commission and city council when those proposals come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Grummer. Mr. Holt, did you have anything further?
I have some more questions for Mr. Grimmer.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned that what has changed is that somebody's proposing something with single-family houses as opposed to multifamily. But Mr. Grimmer, from what I understand, if it goes PRD, I think it was mentioned that it could be condos, it could be apartments, it could be anything. What is to prevent us to approve this rezoning and then the land sell in 6 months and somebody wants to put apartments there? It's already, it would be rezoned and allow them to do that. That would be within their rights. Is that not correct?
It would be within their rights to propose something other than what they presented. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so my point is this isn't in stone, that there's going to be 6 or 5 residential properties there. It could be anything. So we need to bear that in mind.
I will say they still have to present a development plan to planning commission and city council for approval. So you can deny their request because of the development plan. So that's one of the reasons why the discussion from R1 zoning to PRD gives a little bit more credence to the review process that can be approved.
Well, if it is R1, Mr. Grummer, that would just limit them to a few residential standalone residences. Is that correct?
So according to the engineer who is also Holloway Engineering, they said that if it goes R1, then by right, they can present a subdivision of that land and that does not have to go to city council. And according to the engineer, they could subdivide those into lots that could accommodate more than 5 houses. I believe you mentioned about 15 homes from a single family standpoint. So one of the reasons for the PRD was to allow more review. They felt, and the applicant felt, it was in the city's best interest to do that so that you can hold them accountable to what they're presenting.
Okay, thank you.
And can I add, from day one, we're just 5 lots, and the PRD gives the planning commission and the city council the overhead of an overview of what we're trying to do. It's just 5 lots. And I was going to get that into more detail in the next reading, but it's just 5 lots. That's all it's going to be. But the PRD does give y'all more control. We could just do R1, but the PRD is in the best interest of Maumelle and City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. If I may respond to you, the question that you just asked, Mr. Grummer, is the very same debate that Mr. Grummer and myself have had for a little while. And that my position was that if it's PRD, there's other things than just residential that could come in. But if it's PRD, there's a preliminary development plan review process that includes the assessment of various factors that wouldn't be taken into consideration if it were R1 and they were able to, by right and without further approval from the Planning Commission and City Council, make certain to where you could end up with higher density single family residential units. I believe the city attorney wanted to comment on that too.
Well, just to point out, if it is changed to PRD, what I understand our consistent practice to be is that the Planning Commission and then the City Council looks at it from a perspective of, does the development plan meet all the requirements of the code? And so if we get another development plan that's not consistent with what's proposed, then we're still going to have to look at it from the viewpoint of, is it consistent with the code? Are there any code violations? So, I mean, yes, there is another level of review, but we can't necessarily hold them to 5 lots once it's rezoned as PRD.
Yeah, it's 4 acres of property there, so each with 4 homes or whatever it is, it'd be rather large homes, or else they're still gonna have extra space left over if they don't use an acre for each home. So for me, it's a very iffy thing.
Thank you. Councilmember Mazzoni?
Yeah, question for Mr. Grummer again. And this is a lot, as I showed tonight, I got a steep learning curve here. One of the questions I have is it's open space. We only have so much open space before we give it up. I tried looking in the Maumelle forward and I couldn't find anything about in there what looking long-term was on there. I know your land use plan, do you look before these come up on 10 years down the road, this is the best use of space, because once we develop it, you're not going to get open space back. So how do you guys, when you guys look at a request for open space, how do you, I guess the question is, how do you put in the value of open space versus a residential coming in before you make a due pass recommendation, if that makes sense?
Well, I mean, there's an open space requirement with every development. Now, you're talking about existing open space. You're also talking about an existing golf course that's utilized as public space or semi-quasi-public. We look at the ordinance and whether or not if there's things such as, is there a significant change in the neighborhood that requires a change? What's the long-term planning? The Maumelle Ford that you related to reviewed some of those things. During that time, the water treatment plant was fully functional, and at the time, it wasn't thought that it would be decommissioned. So that wasn't taken into account as far as redevelopment. So being that was decommissioned and taken down, then now we see it is a fenced off, more of a blighted area. It's not being utilized as open space per se because it's sitting there in the middle of the golf course unutilized. So in this specific situation, being that the application has come forward, we look at it as a significant change to the neighborhood because it has been demolished. It can be considered in terms of redevelopment as a blighted area. This is one option. If another option came, we would review it and determine if it's good. As far as the the use of it, because there are other single-family developments around the golf course. Whenever the golf course was developed and the housing was developed around it, there was multifamily, more in this style. So it offered a unique situation. I see the concerns from the golf course, and we took that into account, having to drive next to the clubhouse. But the fact that there was existing or past commercial operations that had employees and had commercial trucks and other things, then, you know, we considered that as this just kind of a less impact use as the previous, and it does fit within the overall area. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I've got a follow-up for Mr. Drummer after that question, if I can ask it.
Just a moment, Mr. Mosley. Councilmember Shin?
One question, how does that relate to the development of Ninth Fairway and the way it was done?
To what fairway?
Ninth
Ninth
Fairway,
fairway?
the multifamily area there of the townhouses that were built on golf course land?
Right.
Is there any relation in changes as far as what we're proposing, what's being proposed now versus what was done then?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the Ninth Fairway was developed or in the 80s, in the early stages of the city of Maundell development. That was golf course land that was turned over and changed into residential. I'm not very familiar with what actions took place with that. I believe it may have happened before we actually became an actual city.
Madam City Attorney?
Just to address that a little bit more, our current code sections on the amendment of the land use plan didn't become effective until the first version became effective in 1998. And then it was amended again in 2011. So we wouldn't have had the same criteria in place.
Thank you. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, sir. The last time that we looked at this, our city attorney had read off 4 requirements that are guidelines for how we should approach this rezoning that would be involved here. And the first one that talked about, we have to consider, and you have to justify, it says, what other changes have occurred in the neighborhood since the land use plan was adopted or the latest amendment was enacted? Now, the word other is a very key word. And I think our city attorney had interpreted that as being something other than the property in question. I just heard Mr. Grummer talk about a change that occurred, and he said, and he was counting the water department property there as the change that justifies addressing this. And I think we need to use the word other. Mr. Grummer, is there other changes other than this piece of land that would justify us making this change?
Well, I think, Mr. Mosley, if I can just chime in right there. So I don't see anything in the code that says other means other than that piece of property. I read other to be other than the thing being proposed, which is the requested land use amendment and the rezoning. So it's things in my opinion that are other than that, and it's really up to the council to make that decision. But I think that you can look at things other than the rezoning request, such as the removal of a water plant in that area. I don't see anywhere where it says other means things other than that property. I wanted to also really quickly point out if you look at the city code, what the purpose and intent of PRD districts is. One of the things is to encourage a variety and flexibility in land development and land use in a zone that will be prominently residential, and to maximize the enhancement and minimize the disruption of existing natural features and amenities found in the PRD site. When you go down and look at some other sections, some of the guidelines that we're supposed to talk about when looking at development in PRDs and the preliminary development plans are things like consideration of some of the natural site amenities. It says the things such as project density, building locations, common usable open space shall be combined in such a way as to further the health, safety, amenity, and welfare of the city. And of course, a preliminary development plan would require a public hearing where the public would be able to come in. And so I mentioned earlier the argument, or really a discussion would be a better way of putting it, that I had with Mr. Grummer on whether R1 or PRD would be better to protect the golf course and what was going on up there. After getting my arm twisted a little bit, I think I've also come to the conclusion that PRD and these factors that the council's allowed to and really required to consider when approving PRD allows the council certain, and planning commission, certain authority to ensure that the guidelines as stated in the city code are enforced. And so in a way, PRD gives the council more authority to address things like traffic. And I think that even if these were approved, there's going to be an uphill battle by the applicant to show that they can get a road in there that is safe and doesn't interfere with the public safety in that area. And I think that so even if the zoning is changed, in my personal opinion, I think they still have an uphill battle to show that these factors that are in the city code are sufficient for the council and planning commission to approve and recommend approval of that preliminary development plan.
I'd like to ask the city attorney what her opinion is of the word other in this situation.
Well, let me go back to that code section. Sorry, I jumped to 94,449. I'm trying to keep up with the mayor, so let me go back. And I try to read all of these in conjunction with each other. Let me.
Yeah, there's 4 of them there. They're all important.
I'm about to get back to it. I thought, maybe not.
What section? Councilmember Mosley, for my purposes, did you have that section code handy?
It's section 54-79, and it's under item 7.
Okay, so. So the first guideline is other changes that have occurred in the neighborhood since the land use plan was adopted or the latest amendment was enacted. And then along with that, with B, whether these changes resulted in a change to the neighborhood's character sufficiently to justify the proposed land use plan change. Reading those two together, my understanding is that means that there are changes other than just to the proposed area meant to be the designation changed for their land use. Reading those two factors together, that's how I understand them.
Okay, so in other words, we should be relying on something else. For example, like over in the Country Club of Arkansas, we now have a interconnection to the expressway and a road that goes out there, and there's a lot of land that's better suited, and that would be a major change that would allow us to change maybe residential to commercial that runs along White Oak Crossing. That to me would be a perfect example of something that's changed. And I guess I still don't see any change in that area. That area of town has always been open space in that area. And this one item that we're looking at is actually surrounded by open space, and it's actually surrounded by land that's owned by the Marmel Country Club. And so there's nothing really that's changed over there that in my mind, there's not a clear change that would justify this, is my point. And I agree with the city attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? Or I'm sorry, any additional council member discussion on this issue?
I've got another one.
Go for it.
Okay, spot zoning. Why would this not be spot zoning? We had a council workshop on zoning and that sort of thing. And there was a very interesting comment that was made, I guess, in a court ruling that said if you would, a challenge in the way of spot zoning would not be overcome if the zoning were changed more for a favor for somebody as opposed to what's in the public interest in that area. And what disturbed me, I think a lot during the planning commission meeting, there was a lot of discussion about how to get the highest offer for that land. And it began to look quite like they were considering what would give CAW the highest price for that land. And so that, to me, comes off as looking like a favor. So I don't know that, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but it sure sounds like we would have trouble if somebody were to challenge this on a spot zoning basis. I'd be interested in anybody's comments on that.
Thank you, sir. Is there any additional discussion on ordinance 1023, first reading?
I've got one more. What I would recommend to the city council members, you all go over and take a tour of the Maundell Country Club and see exactly what's going on over there so that you'll know exactly what the situation is. You've got a driving range that runs right along those properties, and there's a big net that goes along there. And my guess is the first thing that'll happen once the house is built there, they're going to be clamoring to have that net taken down so they can see the river better and whatever. There's noise over there. They have situations and things that didn't bother a water department over there that would certainly bother those residents. I think, and a good example of that was the complaints that were about their party back there in July or whenever that was. And they agreed they would turn and make the music go the other way toward the river, and that would be facing those lots. So rezoning that to a housing area would definitely change the situation there at the country club. So I would definitely, if you're going to vote yes to pass this, you definitely needed to have gone over there to that country club and see exactly what's going on over there. I think that's all I got for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Any additional discussion on ordinance 1023? If not, it'll be on second reading at the next city council meeting. The next order of business is the first reading of ordinance 1024, amending the Marmel zoning map. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maundell, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1024, an ordinance amending the Maundell zoning map and for other purposes.
This is the zoning map for the same area that we were just talking about. Is there any discussion on ordinance 1023? If not, this will be on second reading at the next city council meeting. All right, moving on to resolution 2021-5, Pulaski County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Madam City Clerk Treasurer, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maundell, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, a resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2021-5, a resolution adopting the Pulaski County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan for the City of Maundell, Pulaski County, Arkansas, and for other purposes.
This is, thank you, Madam City Clerk. This is the Pulaski County Hazard Mitigation Plan. It is a fairly substantial document that I'm sure everyone is just dying to dig through the detail. This was done through Central Arkansas Planning and Development District in cooperation with the surrounding cities and counties here. And one of the things we're required to do is to adopt, well, for FEMA requires local jurisdictions have such a plan. And then what we have done is sort of partner with Capidity to get that done so that we don't have to do our own solely. And it also names Maundell Fire Chief as the Emergency Management Director. Did Chief Ezell already leave? Okay, I should probably let him know about that. But. Is there any discussion on resolution 2021-5?
Got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
In the second to last whereas, it says, whereas it says it has initiated development of a county-wide jurisdiction hazard plan. Is it finished or is it still being developed?
Yeah, yes, it is. They have developed it and it was approved on January 19th, 2021.
Okay, I didn't see the plan in the packet. Is there a plan that we would be able to look at?
I'm more than happy to send you a link. This isn't urgent. If someone wanted to table it, it's a cool 150 pages and there are some pictures, not many, so it should be pretty fun reading.
Yeah, well, I do have, there was a time back when I first became an alderman, we approved some type of a revision to fire changes and that sort of thing that had been, we just presented the book and here it is. And we adopted it. Next thing I knew, we had some more city permits required and they relied on what was in that document to go ahead and require permits and things. And so I guess I'm very hesitant to go ahead and adopt something that I haven't read or haven't, it just, I worry about that because is there going to be something in there is it going to change something we do around there by adopting something we haven't read?
Possibly. It's dealing with how we mitigate hazards. I'm familiar with the ordinance that you were talking about, where the city council, not long after both you and I first got on the city council, where the city passed an ordinance adopting not just a specific version of the fire code, but the newest revision going forward. This doesn't have the force of law, just the resolution. Again, if you would like to read this, someone's more than welcome to table this and you're welcome to read it, which doesn't seem unreasonable.
Okay, I'd make a motion to table this to the next meeting so we have a chance to look at it.
We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion to table this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Motion carries. This will be tabled to the first meeting. I will send out the plan.
I did vote no on that.
You voted no to table it?
Oh, I thought I didn't get a second on the motion to table. Did I get a seconding motion?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought I never got a second there. Okay, yeah, I'm in favor of tabling it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is resolution 2021-6, Civil Service Commission term limits. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, Pulaski County, Arkansas, resolution number 2021-6, a resolution conforming the terms of previously appointed members of the Civil Service Commission to 6-year terms as required by Arkansas law and the Maumelle City Code and for other purposes.
Outstanding. Long story short, some time ago, we started treating the civil service commissioners as though that term was 5 years and not 6. Our code and state law both say it's 6. Once the city clerk recognized this issue, the city attorney advised that a resolution just sort of setting things right would be advantageous. Is there any discussion on this?
Motion to approve.
I've got a motion from Councilmember Saunders and a second from Councilmember Mazzoni. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve Resolution 2021-6? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. That concludes new business. And we will, by the way, if anyone would like a printed off version of the mitigation plan, I've got a copy here that I'm happy to give away. I wanted to give everyone an update on the winter storm. I know most of you aren't aware, but there was a little bit of snow recently and ice out in this region. The first group of people that I wanted to thank and really point out the work that they've done is a group that I think is often under-recognized, and that is the folks over at Public Works, specifically in this instance, the snow crew. The way this works is as soon as it looks like inclement weather is coming to where we may need to plow, sand or salt the streets, we pull the snow crew in. There was a team of 14 individuals that didn't go home for a week. We were running 4 plows, sanders and salters 24 hours a day, with the exception of when they were broke, which was often, or when every shift change, we thawed out the truck, cleared all the ice out of the equipment and sent it back out. So someone may say, well, 4 trucks, if there's only 2 shifts, that's 8 drivers. What are the other 6 people there for? Those other 6 people are there because this equipment breaks all the time. But let's just say we ended with 1 operational truck out of the 4. 3 were down at the end and unable to be fixed because we were unable to get parts. And so that was as of Saturday. We had only 2 loads of sand, which is not very much. But these people were out there the entire time, not just for the fun driving around. I think we only had a couple accidents. Folks should just please remember that just because they're big trucks or have chains on them doesn't mean that they can get up and down the roads themselves very easily. And so on occasion, when we've had vehicles get stuck at the bottom of hills, we just won't plow or sand or salt that because we think we're going to do more damage, or in the case of some cul-de-sacs where you go down a hill, you get a vehicle stuck there. But nonetheless, they were out there a whole lot. You, of course, had your fire department had a number of calls increased as water lines started bursting, and they're out there trudging through the snow looking for water meter turnoffs, trying to do things to fix the pipes. And of course, the police department, I had a number of calls that they had, but that really doesn't even represent what they've been doing, because a whole lot of their calls are not people who called in, rather just driving down the street and seeing people who were stranded down there. And so motorist assist, unsolicited motorist assists. Police, even with that, police had 128 calls for service that they believe were weather-related calls during that time frame. You also had police officers giving medical personnel rides to the hospitals where they needed to be at, nurses, doctors, et cetera. And so they were really out there getting work done. I want to give a shout out to HR and finance. You may think, well, what were they doing in the storm? The fact of the matter is we still had to get payroll out, which required manually entering payroll in the system up here at City Hall. So we had people here in the snow or teleworking in, trying to make sure that everyone got paid and that it was as accurate as possible. What else is there? You got to think like 100,000 residents. I know we don't have that many, but as I was driving around, I put probably over, well, I know I put more than 300 miles on my car in the snow during that time. And when you saw a car broke down or someone who needed a ride, you almost always saw another resident that was just driving home that had pushed or was pushing them out. From my wife, I know, Tina, there's some residents that were going out of their way, delivering groceries. I've had several people say that we really need to recognize Hall Ramsey, who's on the Planning Commission, is that he went out of his way. It's really neat seeing not just the people paid for it or the people in service areas, but just your average residents jumping in and helping out. And so there's probably too many to name, and I inevitably I'm leaving out a whole host of folks there. But and here's another shout out to Entergy. How nice was it to not really have much of power outages? I know we had a little rolling blackout. My understanding is none of them lasted more than 35 minutes. CAW was out working, making sure that they're turning off lines as pipes are freezing, and North Little Rock wastewater. You know, things all in all went pretty smooth out here, and so for that we are grateful. But it's been a long 10 days. So that concludes my winter storm overview. I also wanted to make it really clear why I postponed the council meeting as opposed to just holding it virtually. We had two very important issues that the public is, as you know, interested in. And while Ordinance 1000 allows us to take 10 public comment cards to be read into the record, it doesn't allow the residents to come and sit here and petition their government. And so I called Mayor Watson, and I feel like I talked to a lot of folks about whether or not to just go all virtual at the last meeting or postpone it. So hopefully that worked out. And that concludes mayor's comments. So we will move on to council member comments. Councilmember Tierney.
Yes, I'd like to also compliment all the different city services for the great work. I saw the trucks out with the snow plows. And I'd also like to thank you for your leadership in this time of crisis. I think you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really the men and women that had boots on the floor that got it. I got to go home most of the time. So they did always. Councilmember Mosley.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a shout out too about the winter. I talked to you there last week during all that, and was totally impressed with how organized things were, and just going out. We've got a little Jeep, and we were out driving around, and you saw the sand trucks with their little snow plows on the front zooming around, and there was sand all over the place for a little southern city that has no reason to invest a lot of money in snow equipment. I think Maundell looked great. All the major streets and arterial streets were plowed. A lot of times it was down to the asphalt. If somebody could get to that arterial street, they could go somewhere. So they did a great job, and my heart goes out to the trash people. They're going to have to do double duty here too. So anyway, thanks to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should, of course, name Mike Hogan. You can name all his crew, but of course, he was there in the trenches. I always heard of Robert Cogdale before him being the guy on the forklift or the plow out there himself. Mike Hogan's the exact same way, sleeping there at the building with his troops, so to speak, and really keeping that machine running. Councilmember Saunders.
Thank you, Mayor. In complimenting our city, and I love Marmel, I saw something on the internet just this morning where some granddaughter said that her grandmother was taking the trash out, and she slipped and fell on the ice, and one of our sanitation workers went and helped her. Did you hear about that?
I have not.
Well, I saw it on the internet, and I'm just going to have to assume it's true. But you know, that really suits the personality of Maundell, and that's just one more reason why I love Maundell. So anyway, you might check into who that person was that helped that grandma that fell. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any additional council member comments? All right, Madam City Attorney.
No city attorney comments tonight.
Madam City Clerk?
No comments.
Outstanding. Take a peek at the RDOT STIP press release in there. And with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that matter? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.